everyone. Welcome to our award-winning podcast created by George S. Corey and the artist Cleo. We're back for Season 3, and so are Georgie and Gigi, for more fun adventures.
I'm George.
I'm Cleo.
I'm Steven.
I'm Maya.
And I'm Tavia. Welcome to The Social Contract. Okay, fresh off their magical adventures in Kids Are Brave, Georgie and Gigi have their feet planted firmly on the ground for Kids Are Supreme. If the title wasn't a giveaway, by now you've probably guessed that Georgie and Gigi will be taking us to the United States Supreme Court. As some of you may remember from Season 2, our very own George and Cleo are both practicing attorneys. We'll talk to them about that later in the episode, but it's clear their legal background has helped fuel their commitment to the social contract and to this podcast series. Before we continue, I want to remind everyone to check out the Georgie and Gigi prequel series, PC for Kiddos. The first installment, Baby T, is available on your favorite digital audio and ebook platforms like Apple Books, Amazon, and Audible. The ebook features amazing new art from the artist Cleo, and the audiobook is brilliantly voiced, as always, by Steven DeRosa. Now, on to Kids Are Supreme. Before kicking it over to Steven, let's start things off with an inspirational quote from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, read by Maya.
Thanks, Tavia. You can't always expect to be the smartest person in the room, but you can promise to be the hardest working. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
I could not agree more. That's a promise we can all make. Steven, take it away.
Get back in line, bellowed Sister Elaine to the gaggle of excited fourth graders she was leading. And quiet down. We are at the United States Supreme Court. You will stay in line and mind your manners. Who knows? We may even get to meet a Supreme Court justice. The kids from Our Lady Queen of Peace Elementary School were on a very special class trip. They were lined up outside the Supreme Court building in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. At the front of the line were Georgie and Gigi, best friends and co-presidents of Sister Elaine's Section A homeroom class. A tall woman in a police uniform walked down the steps and made a commanding stop in front of the lines of schoolchildren. Her black-booted feet were solidly planted shoulder-width apart. Her gloved hands were hooked inside her wide black leather belt. She had braided hair and wore silver-mirrored aviator glasses. Her officer's cap was pulled forward, slightly tilted on her head in "don't mess with me" fashion. The kids quickly quieted down in her presence. She looked even more serious than Sister Teresa, the principal of OLQP Elementary. The lady officer nodded to Sister Elaine and shook hands with her. Then she pushed the brim of her cap up and a big smile stretched across her face. "Hello, I am Sergeant Frederica Douglass of the Supreme Court Police. Everybody calls me Officer Freddy." Sister Elaine prodded her students. "What do you say, children?" Good afternoon, Officer Freddy, they chimed in unison. Sergeant Douglass got right down to business. "I absolutely love welcoming up-and-comers such as yourselves to the court and teaching them all about it. The first thing you should know is that the United States Supreme Court is a separate and co-equal branch of government with... Can anybody tell me the other two?" Georgie and Gigi's arms shot up. Officer Freddy called first on Gigi, then on Georgie. "The executive branch," exclaimed Gigi. "And the legislative branch," Georgie added. "Correct. You must have a very good teacher," Officer Freddy said with a wink to Sister Elaine. Yes, we do, replied Gigi, nodding enthusiastically. Sister Elaine is amazing. Sergeant Douglas continued. And because they are separate and equal, each branch has its own stuff, like its own police. Our Supreme Court police stand apart from the police forces that serve the other branches, as well as those that serve federal agencies and the state and local police. Now, are there any questions so far? Gigi's arm shot up. Sergeant Douglas called on her. Okay, young lady, kindly step forward and introduce yourself, nice and loud. Tell us your name, what grade you're in, and the school you attend. Gigi stepped forward and introduced herself. My name is Gigi, and I'm in 4th grade at Our Lady Queen of Peace Elementary. My question is this. How did you become a Supreme Court police officer? Well, Miss Gigi, thank you for asking. I graduated from the United States Naval Academy. I am a decorated combat veteran who is honored to have served our great nation in the United States Marines. After my 20 years in, I retired from the Marines and joined the Supreme Court Police, where I serve to this day. I am also a daughter, cousin, sister, auntie, friend, and godmother to 4 amazing godsons and daughters. Georgie raised his hand next. Yes, young man. Step forward, introduce yourself, and ask your question. Georgie saluted and said, Sergeant, my name is Georgie, and I'm in 4th grade at Our Lady Queen of Peace with Gigi. Are you related to the famous civil rights leader Frederick Douglass? We learned about him in Sister Elaine's government and citizenship class. You sure know your history. I've gotten this question a lot. I am from an African-American family from Canterbury, Maryland, that traces its history since before the Civil War. My Granny Lou has said that we are indeed distant relations of the former slave and father of the civil rights movement, Frederick Douglass. Now, you may remember that Mr. Douglass was an advisor to President Lincoln and an abolitionist along with Harriet Tubman. We know all about Harriet Tubman, right, G? Said Georgie, nudging Gigi. Yeah, but we call her Minty, giggled Gigi. Officer Freddy continued. My parents chose my name Frederica as a tribute to Mr. Douglass, which is a real honor. I have always loved my name. How about you two? Tell me about your families. My family's from Egypt and Lebanon, said Georgie. And mine's from the West Indies, added Gigi. But we're Americans now. Officer Freddy smiled. God bless America, right? As I always say, no matter where you come from, no matter what your family story is, each of us writes our own American story. Well said, Sergeant Douglas, said Sister Elaine. Now, can you tell us more about what the Supreme Court Police do? With pleasure. We guard and protect the courts, the offices, the grounds, and of course, the judges themselves. We even give tours to school kids such as yourselves, which sure does keep us humble. Officer Freddy was leading them up the wide expanse of white marble stairs when she suddenly stopped. Look up, she said, and you see the grandeur of the Supreme Court building. Look down, and you see how the gleaming white steps extend all the way out like a river, as justice flows out of the court building to the United States and its citizenry. The 2 Gs and the other kids in their class marveled at how they could see the Capitol right across the street from the Supreme Court steps. Officer Freddy pointed out 2 enormous statues. She explained how the female figure on the left was called the Contemplation of Justice, and the male figure on the right was the Guardian of Law. Sister Elaine pointed out the words inscribed in the front facade of the building. Equal justice under law. Do we remember learning about societal norms, young people? Well, that statement, equal justice under the law, is the societal norm that has influenced our entire American legal system. And norms are an important part of the social contract, added Gigi, where everyone in a society works together so we all can benefit, right, sister? That's exactly right, Gigi, replied Sister Elaine. And the very beautiful statues, Contemplation of Justice and Guardian of Law, symbolize those very important ideas. Officer Freddie explained how the court did not have its own building until 1935, when Chief Justice William Howard Taft commissioned it, insisting the architecture be based on a classical Roman temple. She told them that Taft was the President of the United States before becoming Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. How smart was he? Sister Elaine, wanting to keep the kids engaged, said, "Okay, as we can all see, there are lots of fun things about this historic building. Can any of you spot anything especially interesting?" "A turtle!" exclaimed Georgie, pointing to a turtle sculpture peering out from beneath a lamppost. "Aw, he's so cute," said Gigi. "We had a turtle named Scooby, like Scooby-Doo. He loved bananas." "They are tortoises, not turtles, and you'll see them all around the building as symbols of our system of justice," Officer Freddie explained. "You see, they represent the slow but steady pace of justice. Another thing about tortoises, did you know that they are considered sacred to many Native American tribes? Indigenous peoples believed the tortoise retrieved mud from the bottom of the sea with which the earth was created." The kids were impressed with that. They approached the Supreme Court's enormous hand-sculpted bronze double doors with 8 panels showing scenes that depicted the creation of law. George's curiosity got the better of him, and he poked one of the panels. "No touching, Georgie!" Sister Elaine's voice rang out. "Sorry, sister. I was just wondering if this is one of those guys from ancient Greece that you taught us about." "Very close, young man," Officer Freddie told him. "He's one of those ancient Roman guys, the Emperor Justinian. He's important because way back in the 6th century, he compiled all the laws that existed in that time into a single written body of law known as the Justinian Code, or its fancy name, the Corpus Juris Civilis." Gigi pointed at another panel. "This one looks like King Arthur." "Right?" Sergeant Douglas replied with a chuckle. "That's King John of England. In the year 1215, he signed the Magna Carta, which was also very important because it established that even the king was not above the law, and that his people had rights of their own. We take human rights and that kind of stuff for granted nowadays, but back then it was quite a new thing." And here is something from the Supreme Court's own history. This is Chief Justice John Marshall discussing the famous 1803 case Marbury v. Madison. It was one of the most important decisions because it held that Congress does not have the power to pass any laws that go against the Constitution. As they toured the majestic building, the energy was frenetic, like being at a track meet watching sprints. Young runners scurried like court pages. Press interns, the people that rush out to announce decisions to the press on decision days, were hurrying about. Sister Elaine explained that while the United States Supreme Court was the highest court in the land, there were indeed 2 ways a decision could be overturned. The first way is by a constitutional amendment, Sister Elaine told them. And only Congress has the power to pass such an amendment. Does anyone know the other way a Supreme Court decision can be changed? She turned to the most vocal students in her class. Gigi, Georgie, but another student, Charlie, who was usually very quiet, surprised everyone by blurting out, "They can change their minds." Very good, Charlie. The Supreme Court may reverse its own decisions. It's rare, but it does happen. Officer Freddie told them the building had its own library, gym, cafeteria, even its own basketball court on the 5th floor. "Hey, Gigi," Georgie whispered. "I know what the highest court in the land is. The basketball court at the Supreme Court." The two G's cracked up, but immediately quieted down after Sister Elaine shot them a look. Sergeant Douglas checked her watch, then informed the children that it was now time to enter the chamber. As she led them inside, the kids oohed and awed at the big open room with huge columns and high ceilings. On the dais, which is an elevated platform like a little stage, were 9 black leather chairs in a semicircle behind a wooden partition. Officer Freddie explained how each of the chairs on the dais was specially made for each of the justices, and how each justice's place was assigned based on the order of when they joined the court, with the Chief Justice in the center. In the background, heavy-looking red drapes hung from the ceiling to the floor. "This is like a Beyoncé video," marveled Gigi aloud. Then, casually walking in from the far side of the dais, was an actual Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson. "Hello, hello," she said with a smile. "What brings you children to the court today?"
Amazing. I cannot wait to find out what happens in part 2. But first, here's some more of my conversation with podcast creators George S. Corey and the artist Cleo. So, I hear from a very reliable source, we'll call it a little bird, that you two have some really big news to share. The book that started it all, your 2022 release, Presidential Conversations for Kids, is coming out in paperback, which is really exciting. This is a new paperback that contains an all-new chapter and new art by Cleo, which is awesome. So I'm wondering, how did this come about? How psyched are you to craft a new encounter for Georgie and Gigi to have with the newly elected president, whomever that may be? What can you tell us?
Well, we're going to stick with the theme of strong women. I think it's really beautiful. When Kamala Harris first ran in 2019, she based her whole election on Shirley Chisholm, the first woman to run for president. She used all the same colors that Shirley Chisholm used. She used the same font. She used everything just as an homage. So I think that's a really great connection. And so I've written it 2 ways. I've written it where they all meet at Inauguration Day, and Shirley Chisholm comes out of like all the artwork and pictures that Kamala Harris has, and they all got to meet that way in today's date. And then we also thought, well, they can also meet as kids. So I also wrote a version where Georgie and Gigi go in and say, let's talk to them. And so there's both those ideas. I like the inaugural because it has like the majesty, and I get to explain about the whole inauguration process and make it fun and bright.
That's beautiful. Cleo, circling back to Kids Are Supreme, I want to read something that Officer Freddie tells Sister Elaine's class as they walk up the Supreme Court steps. Look up, and you see the grandeur of the Supreme Court building. Look down, and you see how the gleaming white steps extend all the way out like a river, as justice flows out of the court building to the United States and its citizenry. Those are your own observations on the night before you left D.C. to attend law school in New Orleans, and that is so beautiful. Looking back, what was motivating you to pursue a legal career? And how has the practice of law been different, do you think, from the study of law? What have you learned?
Especially in today's environment, thinking about the rule of law, the respect for that, and treating people equally and fairly. I think that those are the things that made those words come out, and the appreciation and the reason to go to the Supreme Court was really that ultimate admiration for our form of government. I think that always, whenever you actually practice something versus study it, it isn't always as straight of a line. But I still think that even in practice, that whole concept of the rule of law and the ability to make ourselves better and more democratic, bring more people in, that really still is underlying what everybody does who is an attorney, that syncs up with the whole legal career and wanting that rule to be what guides us, not dictators. We're not being governed by a personality or a character or a bully. We're all being measured by the same rules, that no one's above the law, which the aspiration of that, at least, is still, I think, something that really is very, very, and I keep going back to hopeful, is that we've always moved in that direction. And you've heard numerous times now that no one takes away rights. We expand our rights, and that makes us a true multicultural democracy. And I really think that is the experiment that we're here to fulfill. And so that's what I mean by the rule of law versus the rule of men.
Yep, I totally agree. That's spot on. George, you're an attorney as well, and I know that you have a reverence for the law and for our system of justice. It comes across in every word and every syllable of what you write. And I know you obviously have a deep respect for the Supreme Court. You've made this story so accessible, which is so lovely, not only for our listening audience, but also for non-lawyers. I'm wondering how your training and experience in the law shaped Kids Are Supreme.
I like the grandeur of the law. I love how language can be used to set the rules, to create guardrails, and to protect our rights. As much as beautiful and inspirational and self-fulfilling, I also see it as, using that beauty to protect us all, But honestly, the reason I was drawn to the law, I had a very young experience. We immigrated to the country in 1968 when I was 5 from Beirut, Lebanon. And we became naturalized citizens in 1972 after 4 years. And we went to this federal courthouse in Galveston, Texas, where my parents were residents at University of Texas Medical School. And we went up to the judge to be sworn in. And my dad had said, only let me speak, only let him speak, I wanted to speak to the judge. I was in 2nd grade, and I walked right up and I said, I'm becoming a citizen today. And the judge was an old gray man, probably my age, now 60, craggy face. And he said to me, why do you want to be a citizen? What do you think about this country? What would you change? Okay, that's great. Do you want to be sworn in with your parents or alone? I said, alone. I am a citizen, alone. And so I did. I put up my hand, and he swore me in before my parents, before anybody. And it was me alone. And that's what I thought of. That's honestly the reason that I was drawn to the law. It really was. To me, the real experience was standing in front of the judge myself and knowing that even as a little kid, I could change my own life, And I did it myself.
Yeah.
I'm a citizen. So anyhow, long story, but that's the truth.
I love it.
Yeah.
On that note, we've come to the end of our episode. These are going way too quickly. We welcome you to follow The Social Contract wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And check out our website at mytscpodcast.com. You can find George at georgescorey.com and the artist Cleo at theartistcleo.com. The Social Contract podcast is created by George S. Corey and Cleo, produced by Talkbox Productions and Listen, hosted by Tavia Gilbert. Associate producer Tatiana St. Fard. Mix and master by Brian Barney. Additional dialogue editing by Kathleen Conti. Production coordinator Brian Wilson. Social manager Suzette Burton. On behalf of George, Cleo, Stephen, Maya, and me, Tavia, thank you for listening.